Greenwood University is set in a small college town in the Midwest. The community is actively engaged and employed by the university. The university has about 20,000 students and has an active wide array of clubs, student organizations, and an active Greek life. A special collections librarian who has taken an archives course through her MLIS has been selected to run the new university archives. There is a large intake of faculty papers and student groups, a complete run of annual reports and bulletins, the university newspaper, and other publications and manuscript collections produced at the university. This is in addition to the documents already in the special collections. Combined, there is now over 1,000 cubic feet of documentation. 3 years after the creation of the archive, it is a centennial celebration of the university. Therefore, the archivist has been tasked with creating a presentation from the archives on the history of the university. The archivist, in her research of the history of the university, became very interested in Stephen Miller, World War II veteran and the first African American professor with a specialty in alternative fuels. It is this 50 cubic feet of documentation that inspired the archivist to apply for the NHPRC grant.
The mission of an archives is meant to detail the responsibility of an archives and its goals. When approaching the mission of Greenwood University's archives, we thought in great detail about what the goals should embody. The mission statement is a vital aspect of establishing an archive because every item that is added to the archive should only be added if it reflects the mission of the institution. It serves as a guide for what records can be accepted and allows us to turn down items that do not fit the needs of the archive. Our specific mission statement needed to reflect our need to collect records which help us develop comprehensive coverage of the university's history and the need to cover the university's connection to its neighboring community. The mission of the Greenwood University Archives is as follows. The University Archives is the official institutional repository of records that document the history of Greenwood University. The archives' mission is to collect, organize, preserve, and share records that are deemed as having legal, fiscal, administrative, social, or historical value to the university and to create an open relationship with the surrounding communities. The main difference between the mission statement and vision statement is that while the mission statement is a summary of the responsibilities of an institution, the vision statement states specific goals for the future of the archive. When focusing on the future goals of the archive, we wanted to highlight the need to engage the surrounding community as it would also foster outreach for our archive, and the relationship between the university and the broader community is so rich. We also aim to acquire collections which diversify our collections as a way to build representation of history and uplift the voices of those in our community who have historically been underrepresented. Technology is also a focus as well, as this allows us to both preserve our collections and make them more accessible, which relates to one of the main tenets of the archives field, which is to not only preserve archives, but also make them accessible. The vision of the Greenwood University Archives is as follows. The archives will focus on outreach and community engagement to enrich the relationship between the archives and its communities. Continue to obtain collections that reflect Greenwood University's diverse communities. Use technology to improve access to collections for researchers in and out of the university. And stay up to date on preservation practices to ensure the safety of both physical and digital collection materials.
So we're going to look at the environmental scan SWOT analysis. So we're going to start with the political aspects of the environmental scan. So there are a few good political strengths that the archive is working with. First is that the library director is working with the archivist on a grant, and the Public Relations Department, Alumni Association, and the student body are interested in supporting the archive. So politically speaking, the archive has a great deal of support from the other departments at the university. The Public Relations Department is in part supportive because they are looking to celebrate the centennial of the university, and so they would like to utilize the historical materials that the university has. As for weaknesses, there is a lack of guaranteed support for the future, so the public relations department is deeply interested now, in large part because of the centennial, but you don't know what the future may hold. As for opportunities, the university has a strong interest in outreach to its diverse community of around 200,000 people who work or have life centered around the university, the community at large, and the archives can create or empower new or existing programs that are focused on diversity, which is of big interest to the college. And then there are a few threats. If something comes up in the archival documents that is unsavory, there may be tensions between different organizations, different departments of the university itself, or different demographic groups in the community of the university. So looking at the funding, one of the strengths is that the Alumni Association is so supportive, and they're willing to give money and to fundraise to support the growth of staff and facilities for the university. And as mentioned prior, the library director is working with the archivist on a grant. And that, of course, the flip side of that means that there is no guaranteed funding for the archive, even from the university. Opportunities, they're mostly related to the grant. They plan on obtaining a grant that focuses on diversity, digitization, and community access, and then specifically the Miller Papers collection. It is a candidate for an NHPRC grant. Threats-wise, there is, of course, no guarantee that any of the grant money will be awarded or that it will be enough, and any budget given might be eaten up by a large startup costs of just establishing the archive. As for technology, again, the Alumni Association is interested in the archive and supporting it and fundraising for it. So they're interested in digitizing the collections, and that, of course, leads the university to want to create websites for the collection. And then the university library is a part of a consortium to create a larger cooperative digital library. So there's a lot of people that have vested interested in digitizing and the archive. As for weaknesses, of course, there is no information currently online about the archives or what it contains. There's no online catalog, and there might not be enough support or skills in the library and in the archive to expand the archive's online presence and accessibility. Opportunities-wise, they would like to update the website and really create a website for the centennial celebrations that are upcoming, digitizing collection materials to make them more accessible and discoverable. And this means, of course, adding information to the website and catalog to increase discoverability. And as mentioned, increase accessibility by creating online finding aids, because as of now there aren't any. Threats-wise, the current archivists may not have enough digital or technological expertise to take advantage of the opportunities presented to them. They're actually they are a librarian who has had some education in archiving but is not an archivist by trade. And then funding might not exist to support the technology needs for systems and digitizing. Staffing. So there is one dedicated university archivist who was formerly part of the library's special collections, so that's a strength. Weaknesses-wise, there is only one dedicated staff member who has a very little archival experience. And in general, there's just a lack of employees and expertise in the archive. Opportunities. There is hope and room for an increase of staff by creating more full-time or even part-time positions. There's opportunity to create internships and volunteer positions with students at the college, so there's lots of room to grow. The threats to the archive staff, in regards to the staff, there's just a lack of staff, which can lead to a backlog of unprocessed collection materials. There's lack of staff in training, could lead to inconsistencies in organization. Funding for more staff might not be available or guaranteed. Student turnover is very high, so if you are depending on students, it can bring its own trouble. So there needs to be a strong system of documentation to create consistent quality work and just consistency from collection to collection, because students might not be there from one semester to the next. And then internships and volunteers, they have limitations on hours. So student workers have working constraints. If the archive uses a lot of volunteers or interns, it will have to create appropriate guidelines and procedures for the program. Facilities. So there is a dedicated space for the archive that doesn't have windows, but the space is very small with little to no ventilation system or climate control. The space does not appear to have any security when it's needed for materials. And there, of course, is the possibility of overcrowding for both materials and staff if you are able to hire more staff. Opportunities, the library is considering finding a larger and more suitable space for the archive, which is encouraging. Threats, there is just a lack of physical space and specifically climate controlled space, which means it will be difficult to just grow the collections and staff. And even though we know that the university, or specifically the library, is supportive, we don't know that there is a better space or more space for the archive to grow. And then, of course, a lack of security can lead to thefts and misuse of collection materials. And then lastly, there's the analysis of the collections themselves. So the Special Collections Department has acquired collections they are willing to give to the archive, and this includes faculty and student group papers, a complete run of annual reports and bulletins, manuscript collections produced from the university and at the university, and the library, the university newspaper, and other publications. The PR office has also discovered administrative and departmental records, photographs, audiovisual materials, and regalia, which they have handed over to the archive. So lots of other departments are willing to share and give what they have that is more properly placed in the archive. As for weaknesses, there, again, are no finding aids for the collections. There's a lack of proper storage for current collections, and the collections exceed the space given to them. And there's a great deal of unprocessed material. As far as opportunities go, the archival collections can grow more through university record transfers, and which would hopefully help to document the university's diverse community. There is a hope or an opportunity to establish relationships with well-published faculty to grow the collection of the archive. The Stephen Miller papers are a good candidate for a grant, and then there's just a hope that or opportunity to process and promote all of the new materials that are being processed in the collections. And then as for stats, the current storage of records can lead to damage or loss of materials. There's the university referenced many items being kept in basements or jammed in cabinets, which could be quite damaging for the materials. Faculty have no necessary obligation to donate to the archive at the university. They could donate their papers elsewhere if they see fit to. And then there is no university records management program currently to help facilitate items to the archive. So it's kind of just if departments hope or wish to share their materials, they do so. So that is the SWOT analysis.
We have 4 strategic directions that encompass our goals for the university archives for the next 5 years. The first strategic direction is to establish an online presence for the Greenwood University Archive. In order to increase access and visibility for the archives, we will establish a web page on the Greenwood University website and add our collection information to the existing online library catalog. Goal number 1 is to create a web page dedicated to the archives, which lists our mission and vision statements, contact and location details, and links to our policies. Goal number 2 is to digitize our collections. Goal number 3 is to improve accessibility by adding links in catalog records to finding aids and the digitized collections. The second strategic direction is to improve our physical space to ensure the security of our collection. Preservation is a main priority for the archives, and therefore we need to establish adequate space for collections and an appropriate workspace for employees and researchers. Goal number 1 is to establish off-site storage to house inactive records. Goal number 2 is to acquire climate control and security systems. And goal number 3 is to set up a dedicated workspace for researchers. The third strategic direction is to establish intellectual control over the archival material. Greenwood University Archives aims to manage the collections to ensure that they are directly related to the mission of the institution. It also aims to manage the records associated with the university and mitigate the life cycle of records to ensure that the university is protected from litigation and is using its storage effectively. Goal number 1 is to establish a records management program. We will do this by surveying the university's records, create a retention schedule, and collaborate with other departments and offices with future donations in mind. Goal number 2 is to reduce the volume of unprocessed materials by weeding out items that are not germane for our collections. And goal number 3 is to establish an internal electronic database for collections and create finding aids for the catalog. The fourth strategic direction is to meet the needs of the community through outreach and advocacy. The Greenwood University Archives will guide the growth of our collections so that they more accurately engage and serve the Greenwood University community and anticipate the needs of future users. Staff must be increased to meet the needs of managing the archive and provide outreach to the community. Goal number 1 is seek to acquire new materials that better showcase the diverse Greenwood community. Goal number 2 is to create programming that raises awareness about the archives within the larger Greenwood community. And number 3 is to start internship and volunteer programs for students and community members who are interested in learning more about working in the public history field.
In order to begin to work on the goals we have presented here today, we need an appropriate amount of staff. This proposed staffing budget will support an initial archives team capable of creating the foundation needed for the archives to thrive. As previously mentioned, the archives will have a full-time archivist who was originally a member of the special collections staff. Their starting pay is budgeted at $65,000 a year with $15,000 in benefits and a 3% raise every other year. We have also budgeted for an archives assistant who would bring more specialized archival skills to the team. Their starting pay would be $45,000 a year with $11,250 in benefits and a 3% raise every other year. Finally, we have budgeted for student workers. As you are aware, there are laws regarding the amount of hours a student worker can work per fiscal year. This budget reflects 20 hours of student work per week at $18 per hour for the first 2 years, and 40 hours of student work per week at $18 per hour for the following 3 years. If a student works the full 20 hours, that would be 1 student hired for the first 2 years and 2 students hired for the following 3 years. We believe this gradual increase of student workers makes the most sense as the first 2 years of the archives, the full-time staff will be focused on establishing policies, procedures, and trainings, with the student workers supporting those initial endeavors, so that by the 3rd year, workflows will be established enough that the full-time staff will have the bandwidth to supervise and train more student workers for more consistent job responsibilities. Along with the staffing budget, we have drafted a preliminary operating budget chart. As you can see, we budgeted for office supplies, collection management supplies, exhibition supplies, technology and subscriptions, professional development, professional services, maintenance and repair, and offsite storage. The budget remains fairly steady for all 5 years, except for the first year and the 3rd year. The first year budget allocation includes startup costs. These costs assume that the archives will need to purchase almost everything themselves, including things like general office supplies, a flatbed scanner, a book scanner, cloud storage, etc. Because this is a preliminary budget, we have not researched further into potential partnerships that a university may already have with vendors or supplies that may be available at a lower cost than we initially encountered. This budget simply reflects the rough amount that we believe would take in order to fully furnish a functioning archives. The increase in budget in the 3rd year is in anticipation of the celebration of the centennial for the university. This includes supplies that we might need for the exhibition, surrounding events, and promotional materials. Much like the staffing budget, these are rough estimates of what we believe is needed to get the archives up and running.
In summary, the University Archives has several goals it wishes to achieve in the next 5 years. These are to establish the staff, budget, and policies needed for the operations of the archives, to create a physical space that is appropriate and safe for our materials, and also comfortable for our staff and researchers, to gain physical and intellectual control over university records, to bring in funding through fundraising and outside grants, and to create programming that highlights the university and its upcoming centennial. The Greenwood University Archives is excited to serve the university and the larger Greenwood community, which consists of over 200,000 individuals. In order to begin protecting and promoting the history of this diverse community, we ask for your support as we establish our department and begin working on some exciting projects. We hope that we have demonstrated the need for a larger space for the archives and its holdings, funding to support the operational needs and management of the archives, and administrative support as we work to transfer university records to the archives. With the NHPRC grant underway and the university centennial celebration happening in the next few years, we are hopeful and excited about the future opportunities for the university archives and for how we can help the university highlight its important history and position in the Greenwood community.
What we've presented here today is just the beginning. These first 5 years are important in building a strong foundation for our university archives. With this proposed budget and staff, we'll be able to work towards the goals we presented to you today, which champions accessibility, preservation, and outreach. Approval of this plan will support not only the archive's vision, but Greenwood University's vision. And with your continued support in the future, we can further grow our archives to support and reflect the diverse and impactful work Greenwood University already engages with. Thank you for your time and consideration of our strategic plan. We look forward to future collaborations to further grow our newly established Greenwood University archives.